biscuits can be this terrible thing, right? I think you might even know what I'm talking about. Dry little hockey pucks that have no flavor. They're just dry and they need gravy. Well, we're gonna make biscuits that don't need gravy. They're gonna have so much butter in them that you're not gonna wanna put butter on them. But you will anyway. So a biscuit is really a simple way of, just kind of a great last minute carbohydrate. You're trying to get dinner going. You need some kind of starch to go on the plate. You're out of potatoes. You don't feel like having rice. You don't have a loaf of sourdough bread for that night. So you make some biscuits. And it's a really simple, basic type of thing. I think everybody should know how to make biscuits. You need butter, salt, a little sugar, milk, baking powder, flour. Like really, that's it. And if you go kind of with some good Kerrygold butter or like Plugra, and you use like a high quality butter, it's going to make all the difference in how rich and delicious these little biscuits are. This is a great last minute project. If you've got like an hour, you've got enough time to get some biscuits happening because they don't really need to cool very long before they hit the table. So what are we gonna do here? We're gonna use a KitchenAid mixer, but you don't have to. I am just choosing to use the KitchenAid mixer because I have one, and when I shot this, it was kind of a last minute project. So I was using a KitchenAid mixer to try and make things faster. You can do this by hand and like use a whisk to cut the butter into the flour, and it works, and honestly, it kind of takes the same amount of time. But with the KitchenAid mixer, you can, walk away from it and do something else with the 2 minutes that it takes for it to cut the butter in. Anyway, KitchenAid mixer, we're gonna add our dry ingredients. So we've got salt, baking powder, sugar, flour, and that's it. Like that's it. And we're mixing our dry ingredients. And I'm sticking a spoon in here, just get everything incorporated, equally distributed. And then we're going butter. And I want to say there's what is it, 110 grams of Kerrygold butter? I don't know, check the description. But a decent amount of butter here. And if you've ever made pie dough, this is kind of like that. We're gonna mix the butter and the flour together with the goal of getting the butter to be, if I were making pie dough, I would say pea-sized pieces of like floury butter. But here I want to go just a touch finer than that. So we want to make our butter get kind of sandy. This is ice cold butter. It's already diced. It's coming out of the fridge. Everything's pre-measured. Everything's ready to go. It's kind of a good way to operate when you're doing a project like this. Have everything ready to go. So mixing time. Obviously, I'm going to edit this down so we don't have to, stare at how long this takes. But how long did it take? It took about 2 minutes for the butter to get like what you see here, where it's just kind of sandy. There's like maybe some like slightly larger pieces, but for the most part, it's pretty sandy. And when I squeeze it, it'll clump together. It'll stick to itself. And this is about all you really. This is it. Like, it's kind of an important step. The butter is going to help to leaven the biscuits. So there's 2 leavening agents happening here, right? There's a chemical leavener, the baking powder, and then there is a mechanical leavener, which is the butter. And the butter releases steam to create leavening. The baking powder, it's a chemical reaction that creates leavening. So we're doing this, and then a sourdough starter, like sourdough bread, that is a biological leavener. So there's different ways to leaven things. We're using a mechanical and chemical leavening process to get our biscuits to lift. Anyway, the butter's looking kind of sandy, floury, buttery mix, and then we're going milk. And this is ice cold, and it's whole milk. Do not use non-fat milk here. You will not make the best biscuits of your life. 2%, you will also not make the best biscuits of your life. This is special milk, and I wouldn't expect you to be able to go to Stanger Ranch and pick up a half gallon of milk that looks like this. It looks like it's maybe 30% cream. But do what you can to get like a high quality, high fat milk. It makes a difference. You want to have high quality ingredients here. And I'm putting the milk right into the mixer. And how long did I just mix it for? Maybe 30 seconds. We're trying to get it incorporated, but we don't want to like smear all the butter and the flour into one homogeneous mass. It's cool to have flecks of butter in there because it's gonna, when it melts and it cooks and it steams out, it's gonna produce that mechanical leavening effect that I was just talking about. So we have this rough dough and it's nice and cold, and I want to work with it while it's cold because I don't want the butter to warm up and then melt. So here it goes onto a work surface. And you have a choice here. You could certainly use a rolling pin to roll out the dough, and we're going to roll it out into kind of a rectangle. I'm using my hands. Hands work. I don't want to like overhandle this, so I'm just using my hands and I'm pressing it out into a rectangle. And from here, you can kind of clean up the edges and really try and square it up. And we're going to layer it. And if you think of like how a croissant works, if you've ever made croissants or you've eaten a croissant and you look inside, it's got layers of flour and butter or dough. Dough and butter and dough and butter and dough and butter. It's this whole layering process that makes it so that it expands. The dough expands, the butter melts and steams, and it creates that amazing, really open crumb of a croissant. So we're kind of doing like a really like basic version of that. We're going to do some layering here. So we're going to take the rectangle that we shaped, and we're going to cut it into quarters. And then we're going to stack those quarters. We're going to stack them right on top of each other. And you see, like, I've kind of added some flour as I'm going. It's a pretty sticky dough, so you're going to need to lightly dust it with flour. If you coat it too much and then we go to stack it right now, it's not going to stick to itself. So we want to have a little bit of protection, so we do have some distinct layers. But if you put too much flour, you might as well it's like you're baking a biscuit on top of a biscuit on top of a biscuit. So it's not going to expand into itself. It's going to be more like individual, like biscuits. Anyway, light flour is what I'm trying to say. So after you have all these quarters stacked up, you're going to press them back out. And if you press them out into about like inch and a half thickness here, you're going to end up with about 12, maybe like 13, because you'll have a little scrappy guy. Biscuits at the end. And I'm not using a round punch. Why not? Why no round punch? Because a round, dough cutter, makes it so I end up with more dough waste, and then I have to like squish it together and keep manipulating the dough to create more biscuits from the scraps that I end up with. So I'm just cutting it into squares, and they'll look cool anyway. And you kind of want to plan out what you're doing here. And you notice that I'm using a bench scraper. And the way I'm cutting the biscuits is I'm flouring the bench scraper and then I'm pushing down. You don't want to have a sawing motion because it will seal the edges of the layers that we just made. Croissants work this way too. Like when you have the ends of a batch of croissant dough and you're going to cut them in their final shape before you roll them up, you want to cut off those ends so it exposes the layers so the layers can expand. And we're kind of a similar thing here. We want to cut off the ends. So you saw me trim up my rectangle or make it like a little bit more rectangle than it was. And then when I'm cutting these strips that I'm going to turn into little rectangle biscuits, I'm pressing down so I end up with layers that can expand upward and don't get stuck on each other. So kind of an important thing. So press down, no sawing motion, and you just plan them out. Now you notice that I've got kind of a weird shape because, the weird corner here. No big deal. Biscuits are a rustic, comfort food type of situation. So don't feel bad if you end up with a couple odd shaped ones. And then you'll see like I've got some scraps, right? I just take these scraps and I kind of stack them up into, a couple rows and then shape them into, another square. And oddly enough, these are the ones that my kids like the best because of the way that they flake apart. So I imagine at some point I will make biscuits that are made of a bunch of strips of the dough instead of just cutting rectangles because they're popular. And then, you know, the very last scraps of dough here, it also gets made into a biscuit. So because I didn't use a round cutter, there is no waste here. And I'm gonna let these guys sit on the counter, and I'm gonna cover them with just a sheet tray lid for as long as it takes my oven to preheat. And I'm preheating my oven now. So instead of ahead of time, so my oven's ready, you know, the 20 minutes that it's gonna take to, you know, get my oven hot and then maybe let it, you know, hang for a moment is gonna be enough to allow the dough to kind of just take some of the chill off of it. And you'll see how that baking powder kind of goes to work a little bit. Same as if you were to make pancake batter, and you make pancake batter and you start noticing that like there's activity happening in the batter as it's sitting. Same kind of thing here. It's gonna lift a little bit. It's not gonna rise like sourdough bread that's proofing on the counter, but you will see it puff a little bit. And then we're going in the oven, 425 for about 18 minutes. 18 minutes is pretty reliable time period. I'll spin them after about 12 minutes, and then they come out. And biscuits are kind of cool because like we don't need like a long cooling time with them. Like with loaf sourdough bread, like it's gonna sit for 2 hours before we can get into it. Biscuits, no. We can go pretty much out of the oven, maybe let them hang out for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we can stack them up on like a nice like serving tray, wrap them in a handkerchief so they stay nice and toasty, and then serve them with some butter and some honey. Because you know, a fresh baked biscuit with this much butter inside, made with whole milk, you open it up, you put like a little slice of, a little pat of butter on there, you drizzle a little bit of honey, sprinkle with some sea salt, man, you're really good to go. That's a special little thing. Something as pedestrian sounding as biscuits can really knock somebody's socks off just based on adding the right ingredients and making sure that as you're mixing the dough, you're not, you know, over mixing the butter and really creaming it out. And then also when you're cutting those edges, you're making sure that you're allowing for the biscuit to expand. So it's really just a couple minor things that make some really simple common household ingredients into these amazing little biscuits. And they're pretty versatile. What do you want to serve them with? Chicken? A steak? Chili? What's good? Pretty adaptable to whatever you want to serve it with. So there you go. Make some biscuits. They're super easy, and it's something that should definitely be in everybody's arsenal.